I used to believe that after 10 years of marriage, I could read my husband like an open book. His habits, his moods, even his little lies, I thought I knew them all. But that illusion shattered the night I stumbled upon a document he never meant for me to see. It was a Wednesday evening, just past 9. Daniel had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he took a call in his office. Normally, I respected his privacy. We were both busy professionals and I had no reason to snoop. But that night, curiosity got the better of me. His screen had dimmed but not locked. A document titled Divorce Agreement Draft 1 blinked back at me. For a second, I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. I tried to convince myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he was helping a friend or researching something. But when I clicked it open, the truth screamed at me. My name, my assets, my life, neatly outlined in black and white with cold legal terms detailing what I would retain after our divorce. And then the worst part, the date. The draft was created 3 weeks ago, meaning he'd been planning this for a while. I scrolled down, and that's when I saw the line that broke something inside me. Client's primary goal, ensure division of assets favors him. Minimize wife's claim. Client, not husband. So Daniel had already hired a lawyer. I felt sick. Every memory of our last few weeks replayed in my head. His sudden late nights at work, the secretive phone calls, the detached affection. I thought he was stressed, maybe distant. But now it was clear. He was preparing to leave me, and not just leave me, but strip me of everything we had built together. When he returned to the kitchen, I closed the laptop quietly and forced a smile. My stomach churned, but I pretended everything was fine. He kissed me absent-mindedly on the cheek and said, "You okay?" "You look pale," I lied. "Just tired." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, thinking of all the sacrifices I'd made for this marriage. I had left a promising job to support his startup. I'd invested my inheritance when no bank would loan him money. I'd built our home, decorated every corner, cooked every meal, while he climbed his corporate ladder. And now, he wanted to erase me, quietly, efficiently, legally. But if he thought I was just going to stand by and let him destroy my life, he was mistaken. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the mist outside. The rage had cooled overnight into something else, clarity. He wanted a divorce? Fine, but I wasn't going to let him take what was mine. First, I needed information. I logged into our joint accounts, took screenshots, and printed every transaction from the last 6 months. Then I checked the property titles, the investment accounts, and the trust fund my father had set up for me years ago. My father had always told me, "Never let anyone else hold the keys to your freedom." I hadn't listened completely, but now I would. By noon, I had everything documented. I called my friend Julia, a corporate lawyer, and asked her to meet me for lunch. When I told her everything, she just stared at me. "You're sure, Anna? You actually saw the document?" "Yes," I said quietly. "And it was detailed." "Too detailed," Julia nodded slowly. "Then listen carefully. Before you confront him, protect yourself. If your assets are in joint names, start separating them. Quietly. Do not let him know you know anything yet." I nodded. Already working on it. That night, I smiled through dinner, made small talk, laughed at his jokes. Inside, I was memorizing every detail, his tone, his eyes, his movements. He was already acting like a man halfway out the door. When he fell asleep, I went into my office and began transferring my personal savings to a separate account under my maiden name. I moved my jewelry to a secure deposit box, and I called my father's old financial advisor, pretending it was about estate updates. Within 48 hours, everything of value that was mine, stocks, cash, and deeds, was legally secured in my name. It was liberating and terrifying. On the 5th night, as I sat on the couch pretending to scroll my phone, I overheard him on a late call in the study. His voice was low, confident. "Yeah, papers will be ready next week. I just need to make sure the accounts are aligned first." She won't see it coming. My fingers clenched. She won't see it coming. Oh, Daniel. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted to see how far he'd go. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye like everything was normal. I watched him drive away, then opened my email and sent Julia a single line. "Everything is ready. Next move?" Her reply came within minutes. "Wait, let him make the first move." then strike. And so I waited. The following week felt like a strange play in which I already knew every line, but had to pretend I didn't. Daniel was composed, charming, careful. He kissed me goodbye every morning and came home with stories from work that I no longer believed. His performance would have fooled anyone who hadn't read the script. But I knew, and knowing changes everything. I began to notice details I'd overlooked before. The way he guarded his phone. The faint scent of perfume on his shirt that wasn't mine. The nervous habit of checking his reflection before leaving the house. The man I married was slipping away, replaced by someone who had already moved on, at least in his mind. Still, I played my role to perfection. Every smile was rehearsed. Every dinner conversation was an act. If he wanted to pretend we were fine, I would let him. I wanted him comfortable, unsuspecting. Because the moment he thought I was ignorant was the moment I had power. That week, I called Julia again. He's preparing to file soon. What do I do next? Her tone was calm, measured. Do not alert him. You've protected your assets, yes? Yes. Good. Now start documenting everything. Messages, bank withdrawals, any signs of infidelity or misconduct. If he's working with a lawyer already, he's probably laying a narrative. We'll need to dismantle it. So I became an observer in my own home. A quiet ghost who watched everything. Thursday night, he got home later than usual. I was sitting in the living room reading when he walked in, looking nervous. He said he'd been out with clients. But his shirt was unbuttoned too casually, and his cologne couldn't hide the faint trace of lipstick on his collar. Not the deep red I wore, something lighter, pink, careless. Rough night? I asked softly. He hesitated, then smiled. Just long. I'll shower. I smiled back, closed my book, and whispered to myself as he left the room. Take your time, darling. I'm not going anywhere. Inside, though, my stomach twisted. I'd suspected it, but confirmation felt like a knife. Still, rage would have been too easy. I wanted precision, not chaos. I wanted him to feel what it's like to lose control. The next day, I went to the office and requested temporary leave. My coworkers assumed I needed a break. They didn't need to know I was plotting the quiet disassembly of my husband's empire. Daniel and I shared investments, but his new company, ironically, had been partially funded by my inheritance. The same inheritance he'd tried to reallocate in his draft agreement. He thought I wouldn't notice the missing 20% he'd moved into a new account labeled Operational Reserve. I smiled when I found it. It wasn't hidden well enough. By Saturday, I had copies of every transaction linked to that account. I didn't confront him. I forwarded them to Julia, who replied almost immediately, "This changes everything. He's misused marital funds. If he files, this becomes your strongest leverage." I didn't want revenge in the dramatic screaming sense. I wanted consequence, slow, undeniable consequence. I wanted him to see his clever little plan unravel, thread by thread, until he realized I'd been 10 steps ahead all along. That weekend, he invited me to dinner. "We haven't been out in ages," he said, smiling too warmly. I agreed, why not? If he wanted to play loving husband, I could play devoted wife. We went to an upscale restaurant, the same one where he had proposed years ago. I could almost laugh at the irony. He ordered wine, made small talk, asked about my work. It felt rehearsed, insincere. He was trying to ease his guilt before the strike. Halfway through dessert, he reached across the table and took my hand. "You know I love you, right?" I looked into his eyes, pretending to search for sincerity. "Of course," I said softly. But what I thought was, "You love the idea of winning, not me." The next morning, I woke up to find him gone early again. This time, I checked the drawer in his office. Empty. The laptop he'd used for that first document was missing too. My heart raced. He was moving quickly now. Around noon, Julia called. "It's time. He's filing this week. How do you know?" I whispered. His lawyer reached out to request preliminary disclosure forms. They're trying to get ahead. I felt cold but not afraid. I'd already secured my ground. "Let them," I said. Then a thought came to me, sharp, dangerous, satisfying. "Julia, what if we let him think he's won first?" "What are you planning, Anna?" I smiled. Just a little truth at the right time. That evening, when Daniel came home, I acted cheerful. I asked about his day, poured him a drink, even offered a back rub. He looked surprised but pleased. He didn't notice the calm before the storm. He mistook it for surrender. As he scrolled through his phone, he chuckled. "You're in a good mood." "Just happy," I said softly. He smiled. Good. I was starting to worry. I leaned closer, whispering, "You never have to worry about me, Daniel." And I meant it. Because soon, he'd realize I was the one he should have worried about all along. Before bed, I checked my email again. Julia had sent one final message. When he files, don't react. Don't respond. We'll counterclaim with full evidence. And when we do, he'll have no idea what hit him. I closed the laptop and looked at Daniel sleeping next to me. He looked peaceful, content, like a man who believed he had everything under control. But 1 week later, when he finally made his move, I was already miles ahead. It was a Monday morning when the courier knocked on my door. I was making coffee, humming quietly to myself, when I saw the man in a dark blue uniform holding a large envelope. "Mrs. Cole?" he asked politely. "Yes," I said, though my chest already knew what was inside. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." The words felt surreal even though I'd been waiting for them. I thanked him, closed the door, and stood in the kitchen staring at the envelope. For a long moment, I didn't open it. I just listened to the clock ticking, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the silence of a home that suddenly felt foreign. Then I took a deep breath, slid it open, and read. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed by Daniel Cole. It was all there, every clause, every request. He wanted the house. He wanted half my savings. He wanted the car registered in my name. And then, the cruelest line, respondent to vacate marital property within 30 days. I laughed. It wasn't a loud, bitter laugh. It was the quiet kind that comes when pain turns into power. 30 days? He thought he could just erase me, move me out of the home I built? Not anymore. Within the hour, I called Julia. "It's here," I said flatly. She replied, "Perfect. Now we move." We met that afternoon in her office, surrounded by piles of folders and neatly organized evidence I'd been collecting for weeks. Financial statements, screenshots, call logs, even photos. Daniel and his client at a restaurant, hands too close, smiles too intimate. Julia flipped through the documents. "You've done your homework. This will be decisive." She drafted our counterclaim that same day. It was calm, factual, devastating. Every hidden account, every suspicious transaction, every misuse of funds, I had it all documented. And because his company had been built partially from my inheritance, I now had legal claim over nearly half his business equity. He had planned to take from me, but in doing so, he'd tied himself to the very assets I controlled. The irony was poetic. That evening, Daniel came home early. He must have assumed I'd received the papers. I was cooking dinner when he walked in, cautious but smug. "Hey," he said lightly, setting down his keys. "You get something in the mail today?" I turned, smiled faintly. "I did. From you." He exhaled, relieved I wasn't screaming. "Listen, Anna, I didn't want it to be ugly. I just think this is best for both of us." I stirred the pasta. "You think so?" "Yes," he said carefully. "I want to do this respectfully. We've had good years, but we've grown apart. I want us both to move on." I wanted to ask if moving on meant with the woman whose perfume he wore last Thursday, but I stayed quiet. Instead, I nodded slowly. "I understand, Daniel. If this is what you want, I'll sign." His face brightened. He wasn't expecting it to be this easy. "Really?" "Really," I said softly, smiling. "I just need a few days to review everything with my lawyer." He agreed, kissed my forehead as if we were still partners, and went to his study. I watched him walk away, still oblivious, still confident in his own cleverness. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from sadness, but from anticipation. He thought he'd won. That was exactly what I needed him to believe. 3 days later, Julia filed the counterclaim. I'll never forget the moment his expression changed when his lawyer called him at home. We were in the living room. He'd just poured himself a drink. His phone buzzed. He answered casually. But then I saw it. The confusion first, then disbelief, and finally, panic. He turned to me slowly. "What did you do?" I set down my book. "What's wrong, Daniel?" You filed a counterclaim?" He stammered. "And you're accusing me of misappropriating funds?" I tilted my head. "Am I wrong?" He stared at me, realization dawning. You knew this whole time." "Yes," I said quietly. "From the moment I found your little draft." His jaw clenched. "You went through my files?" "You left them open," I replied simply. And you were planning to ruin me. He started pacing. You don't understand, Anna. This was supposed to be clean. You weren't supposed to fight back? I interrupted. No, Daniel. You didn't expect me to fight back because you've spent years thinking I wouldn't? You thought I was naive. Dependent, soft. He said nothing. I stood, walked toward him, my voice calm but sharp as glass. You were planning to leave me with scraps after I built your world with my own money. You hid accounts, cheated, lied, and smiled in my face like I wouldn't see through you. He swallowed hard. I didn't cheat, he said, but his voice broke halfway through the sentence. I smiled faintly. Don't worry. I don't need to prove that to win. You left enough financial evidence to bury yourself legally. That's all I need. He stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. Maybe for the first time he was seeing who I really was. The woman he'd underestimated for years. When I walked away to our bedroom, I heard him whisper behind me, "What have you done, Anna?" I paused at the door and turned slightly. I protected myself. Something you should have thought about before trying to destroy me. The next few days were chaos for him. His lawyer called repeatedly, trying to negotiate. Julia refused. We had proof of misconduct, misused funds, and financial deception. The court would see it all, and as his world started to tilt, mine began to stabilize. By the weekend, I'd moved most of my belongings into my parents' old home, which was still legally under my name. He thought he was forcing me to vacate the marital property. In truth, I was relocating on my own terms, with everything that mattered already secured. But the true satisfaction came a week later, during the preliminary hearing. Daniel arrived looking tense. His lawyer whispered furiously as we walked in. Julia greeted me calmly, slid a folder across the table. Let them talk first, she murmured. They did. His lawyer presented the petition as though it were a formality, until Julia rose and began reading from our counterclaim. One by one, she unveiled each document, the undisclosed account, the falsified expense report, the operational reserve. Daniel's face drained of color. By the time she finished, the judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Cole, these are serious allegations. We'll need to review all your financial records. Julia smiled slightly. We're happy to provide ours, Your Honor. Afterward, Daniel didn't say a word as we left the courtroom. He just stood there, stunned. His perfect plan, his quiet betrayal, it had all exploded in his face, and I hadn't even started yet. In the days after the hearing, Daniel became a ghost of himself. He still lived in the same house, though he avoided me like the plague. I could hear the tension in every step he took, the way he shut doors too softly, as if afraid that any sound might provoke me. But I was calm. Too calm for his comfort. He tried to talk one night. I was sitting in the living room, going through some documents, when he stopped at the door. Anna, we need to talk. I looked up slowly. About what? The divorce? The financial misconduct? Or the fact that you thought you could erase me? He winced. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I smiled faintly. Enjoying? No, learning. Absolutely, he sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, I made mistakes, okay? But this will destroy everything. The company, my reputation, your reputation, I interrupted, my tone sharp. That's what you care about? He hesitated. I'm just asking you not to take this too far. We can settle privately, no court. No humiliation. I stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, You wanted clean, Daniel. You wanted control. Now you can have the mess you created. He didn't reply. He just left the room, shoulders slumped, muttering something under his breath that I didn't care to hear. The next morning, Julia called. You were right about the operational account. It links directly to a personal investment under his name. It's clear misuse of joint funds, meaning? I asked. Meaning if this goes to trial, he could lose not only half the company, but also be liable for reimbursement of what he diverted. I exhaled, steady. Good. Let him see what manipulation costs. But even as I said it, a strange mix of emotions swirled in me. I wasn't heartless. There was a time when I had loved Daniel, deeply. A time when I believed in him, believed for him when no one else did. I had built him up, stood beside him, defended him, and he had taken that love and turned it into leverage. Now, watching him unravel wasn't satisfaction. It was justice. Quiet, unflinching justice. A few days later, his partner from the firm called me, by mistake, apparently. The man assumed Daniel and I were still on good terms. "Anna," he said nervously, "we're doing an internal audit, and there are inconsistencies in Daniel's expense reports. You might want to talk to him." I thanked him politely, hung up, and felt something settle deep inside me. The ripples of Daniel's deception were spreading faster than even I'd planned. That evening, he came home late, looking defeated. He poured himself a drink and sank onto the couch. "Rough day?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. He glared at me. "You knew, didn't you?" "About the audit?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not." He slammed his glass on the table. "Do you have any idea what you've done? They're questioning my integrity." I finally looked at him, calm as ever. "Oh, Daniel, they're not questioning your integrity. They're discovering it." He stood abruptly, pointing at me. "You think this is a game? You think destroying me will make you feel better?" I met his gaze. "No, but it will make things right." He stared at me for a moment longer, then turned away, whispering something like, "You'll regret this." I didn't respond, because deep down, he already knew who'd lost control. Over the next week, everything began to collapse for him. His lawyer tried to negotiate a quiet settlement, but Julia refused. The court date was approaching fast, and the discovery process was brutal. Every hidden transaction, every document he'd tried to bury, it all came to light. And then came the affair. The woman, her name was Rachel, had been one of his clients. I didn't seek her out. The world simply delivered her to my doorstep. One morning, I received an email from an unknown address with the subject line, "You deserve to know." Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Daniel and Rachel at a hotel, holding hands, kissing, smiling like the world didn't exist. At first, I just stared. I'd suspected it, of course, but seeing him with her, stirred something sharp and cold in me. But then the sadness that came was fleeting, because strangely, I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. Fully, completely done. Julia's reaction was immediate. "This seals it. Infidelity and financial misconduct. You're walking away with everything." Still, I hesitated. "No, I don't want everything," she frowned. "What do you mean?" "I want enough. Enough to be free. And enough to make sure he never forgets what he lost." We adjusted our claim. I didn't want his company, his debts, or his drama. I wanted the house, the inheritance, the accounts that had always been mine. And I wanted the court record to reflect his actions. The hearing came quickly. It was short but merciless. Daniel sat across from me, his expression hollow. His lawyer spoke fast, trying to minimize damages, but the judge had already seen enough. The evidence was overwhelming. When the verdict was read, Daniel would retain his company, but be forced to repay the misused funds, surrender the marital property, and cover all legal fees. He'd fought to take my security. Instead, he lost his own. As the courtroom emptied, he lingered. I walked past him, but he stopped me quietly. "Anna," I turned, met his eyes. There was no anger left, only exhaustion. He said, "You really hated me that much?" I shook my head. "No, Daniel. I loved you enough to trust you. And you hated that trust enough to destroy it." He looked away, guilt written all over him. I could have walked away right then. But something made me pause. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was mercy. I leaned closer and whispered, "You didn't lose to me, Daniel. You lost to yourself." Then I left him standing there, alone, silent, surrounded by the ruins of his own making. That night, when I returned home, my home, I sat by the window, the same one where I'd once watched the sunrise beside him. The house was quiet, peaceful. I thought of everything I'd gone through, the betrayal, the planning, the waiting, the execution. And for the first time in months, I felt weightless. Not vengeful, not victorious, just free, Julia called later that night. "It's done," she said. "He signed the settlement." "Good," I whispered. "Let it end," she paused. "You did well, Anna. Most people would have lost themselves in anger. You stayed in control," I smiled faintly. "That's the only thing he couldn't take from me." A week after the settlement, the silence in my house no longer felt empty. It felt earned. Every corner, every framed photo, every inch of this space now belonged to me. Not because I'd won it in court, but because I'd reclaimed it with clarity. For years, I'd moved through life like a woman in the background of her own story. I'd supported Daniel's dreams, built his home, kept his world from falling apart. And when he decided I was disposable, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I learned that silence can be sharper than anger. That revenge doesn't always look like fire. It can look like peace. The media had caught wind of Daniel's court case. It wasn't a headline, but in the local business circuit, it spread fast. His firm suspended him pending review, and Rachel, the woman he'd gambled everything for, quietly disappeared from his life the moment things got complicated. Julia sent me the link to an article. Cole Enterprises faces internal scrutiny following financial misconduct allegations. I read it once and closed it. No gloating. No satisfaction, just closure. That Friday, I visited the lake where Daniel and I had gone on our first anniversary. It was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that sits deep in your bones. I sat on the bench, closed my eyes, and breathed. I remembered the girl I used to be, the one who believed that love could fix anything. The one who gave too much, forgave too quickly, and expected decency to be enough. She wasn't naive. She was hopeful. But hope, I realized, needs boundaries. Otherwise, it becomes the weapon that hurts you. When I got home, there was a letter in the mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Daniel. I debated throwing it away. But curiosity won. I opened it slowly, half expecting apologies, half expecting excuses. It was short. Just one page. Anna, I don't expect forgiveness, and I know I don't deserve it. I thought I was smarter than everyone, especially you. I thought I could control how things ended. But you didn't fight like I expected. You didn't scream or curse or beg. You just let me fall into my own trap. I've lost everything I thought mattered. But the truth is, I only started seeing what mattered after you were gone. I hope you're free now. You always should have been. Daniel, I read it twice. Then, for the first time since this began, I let a single tear fall. Not for him. Not for what we were. But for the years I spent doubting my own strength. I folded the letter neatly, tucked it in a drawer, and never opened it again. That night, I cooked myself dinner, not the quiet meals I used to make while waiting for him to come home, but something special. I set the table for one, poured a glass of wine, and lit a candle. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. As I ate, I thought about the irony of it all. Daniel had tried to break me by taking control. Instead, he taught me how powerful it feels to have it. The following week, Julia called one last time. You've received full transfer of assets, she said. Everything's finalized. Thank you, I replied. For everything, she laughed softly. So what now? What's next for Anna Cole? I smiled. No more Cole, I'm going back to my maiden name. Anna Whitmore. Fresh start? Exactly, I said. I'm opening a small consulting firm, helping women who've been through what I have, how to protect their finances, their independence, their peace. Julia's voice softened. That's poetic justice, you know. Maybe, I said. But I'm not doing it for justice. I'm doing it because I wish someone had told me how to be ready. After the call, I sat by the window again, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The light filtered through the trees, casting long golden lines across the floor. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the past. I was thinking about tomorrow. Then, as if the universe wanted to tie the story together, I got a message. It was from an unknown number. I hope you're okay. I didn't reply. Not because of anger. Because I no longer needed to. Instead, I deleted the message, closed my phone, and whispered to myself, I am. Epilogue: a year later, my firm, Whitmore Advisory, had grown beyond what I ever expected. I'd helped dozens of women quietly regain control of their lives. Each story was different, but all began the same way, with trust misplaced, love misused, and a woman rediscovering her power. Sometimes I'd drive past Daniel's old office. I'd see him through the window, shoulders hunched, older somehow. We never spoke again, but I didn't need an apology to forgive him. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. People often say revenge is about making the other person hurt. They're wrong. Revenge, when done right, is about reclaiming what they tried to take from you. Your dignity, your peace, your identity. And as I looked at the life I'd rebuilt with my own hands, I realized something simple and profound. He had planned to leave me broke. Instead, I became untouchable,